Welcome back to The Interview. There are some moments in history that are of such magnitude, you always remember where you were when you first heard about them. If you're old enough, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, the resignation of President Richard Nixon, the freeing from jail of Nelson Mandela. And of course, for those of us living in the United States back in 2001, the Al-Qaeda attacks of September the 11th.
Well, I was nursing a very bad flu. Suddenly, I had a phone call from the embassy. Ambassador, look at the television.
There is chaos in New York at the moment. There have been not one but two incidents.
Then I had three other calls in succession, different staff members. Everyone was concerned that the ambassador should be watching this. I turned on the television, took one look, quickly changed, and dashed to the embassy at once.
America was under attack. Al-Qaeda's coordinated assault on the World Trade Center in New York and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. killed more than 2,700 people and struck at the economic and political heart of the nation. On Washington's Embassy Row, the deaths of 327 foreign nationals that September day cast a shadow over the city's diplomatic community. And while no Singaporean nationals were killed by Al-Qaeda on 9/11, for the embassy, the attacks nonetheless served as a wake-up call, leading to changes in the way it stays in touch with Singaporeans living in or visiting the United States.
On our register, we would have Singapore citizens registered with us. Those who are registered with us and registered in New York, the embassy staff immediately called to see if they were all right. Could they be accounted for? And now we have a wonderful emergency system where there is a connective system, a network where one calls the other, and we get in touch with all the Singapore citizens to ensure that in a case of a disaster, we know how to reach out to them.
And the events of September the 11th required outreach of a different kind. It soon became apparent that as President George W. Bush vowed to find those responsible,
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
US attention turned not only to Osama bin Laden, the man who ordered the September the 11th attacks, but also to Saddam Hussein, the Iraqi leader who did not.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
President Bush gave America's international partners a simple choice in his global war on terror. You're either with us or against us. And in the campaign to bring about regime change in Iraq, Singapore stood shoulder to shoulder with Washington.
We were a member of the coalition of the willing, and we saw it very simply that, like every other country, we believed there was WMD. Here was, Saddam Hussein, who was, in fact, who once went into Kuwait and was responsible for the first Gulf War. And here he was again, stockpiling, as we were told. And after Afghanistan, 9/11, we felt that, terrorism and WMD was a very major problem. So we took the stance to be a member of the coalition of the willing.
US military personnel will be dropped off on the bus.
Driving Singapore's determination to join the global war on terror, its own experience with Al-Qaeda's Asian proxies. In 2002, a plot was unraveled to blow up the Yishun subway station. Jemaah Islamiyah planned to detonate explosives just as busloads of US military personnel were passing by. In an interview given at the time, then Home Affairs Minister Wong Kan Seng was grappling with Al-Qaeda's export of its brand of terrorism.
I think many Singaporeans were shocked, very surprised that indeed we have a small group of Singaporeans trying to perpetuate this terrorism in Singapore. Fortunately, the plan was not proceeded with.
And do you have a sense of why the Al-Qaeda leaders did not authorize the plan to be carried out?
We don't know. Perhaps they could have other priorities at the time.
Today, Ambassador Chan says the unraveled plot played a critical role in determining Singapore's policy.
Don't forget that in Singapore, after 9/11 in New York, we discovered terrorist cells in Singapore. So, it's not like the lesson was so far away. It was immediate at our doorstep. So we saw this as, in fact, a global attempt, coalition to try to beat back a new kind of terrorism.
Many Americans did not see things that way. The war in Iraq was especially unpopular, and it became mired in controversy when US forces failed to find stockpiled weapons of mass destruction after Saddam Hussein's ouster from power. The Republicans paid the price. Senator John McCain tried but failed to separate himself from the unpopularity of the Bush administration.
The television networks here in the United States on the stroke of 11 o'clock in the evening here, midday Singapore, Hong Kong time, have declared that Barack Obama has been elected the next president of the United States.
And so Singapore's ambassador to the United States found herself watching history being made again.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
As America's first African-American president was sworn into office.
How did you view Barack Obama's election?
It was really quite a leap, and I think Americans were rightly, saw themselves as having got over the racist sort of divide when they elected the first black president. I thought that it's too soon and too fast to say is now a post-racial order. Certainly not. In fact, I thought some of the very strong criticism against the president that dogged him throughout the last 3.5 now, coming to the 4th year, perhaps had a bit of a tinge, racist tinge about it. And the birther, those who question where he was born, is it in fact, a code way of saying something else? So I don't think it is over.
When we come back, President Obama presides over an increasingly polarized Washington and pivots US foreign policy in the direction of Asia, just as the crisis in Syria is occupying the minds of diplomats worldwide. Stay with us for more of The Interview.